a whole range of different tools you can use to help monitor Windows 10. The most obvious is Event Viewer. You can access this from Computer Management or by right-clicking Start. You can see here you've got the ability to customize views, to look at the default Windows logs of Application Security Setup System, and I'll talk about forwarded events in a moment, and then the more detailed Application and Services logs. If you want, you can configure that a remote computer sends its event log information to your computer. That's called a forwarded event. So you can take a look in the forwarded events log for events from other computers. To do that, you need to create a subscription first. There are a number of logs available within the Event Viewer. The application log contains errors, warnings, and informational events that relate to applications. The security log contains the results of auditing if you've turned that on through Group Policies, Security Events. You can audit events and they are identified as being successful or failed, depending on what it is you're auditing. Setup events end up in the setup log. And then system events contain probably the most serious stuff to do with Windows components and services. This tends to be the log that you check the most if you're troubleshooting a computer. And as I mentioned, you can store forwarded events from remote computers in the forwarded events log. To do that, you need to enable an event subscription. To enable an event subscription, on each source computer, that's the one from which you want to receive events, run the winrim quickconfig command. That enables remote management on the remote computer. Then on the computer on which you want to view the collated events, we call that the collector computer, run the wetutil qc command. Then add the computer account of the collector computer, that's the one where you'll view the collected events, to the local administrators group on each of the source computers. You can use Task Manager to view a number of different properties. On the Processes tab, you can see the running applications and background processes. On the Performance tab, you can get a snapshot of how things are performing on the computer right now. It's worth noting that any snapshot of performance doesn't necessarily give you an indication of what's generally going on. In this screenshot, for example, you can see the utilization of the CPU or the processor is 6%, but there was a spike up to 100% earlier. So viewing 100% utilization might ring alarm bells, but obviously as we see now it's down at 6%. So viewing over an average period might be more useful. The App History tab allows you to view information about what's been going on with your apps over a period of time. The Startup tab allows you to control the impact of applications that start during startup of Windows. So these are tasks that tend to sit in the system tray in the bottom right hand corner of the taskbar. So there's a task here for Microsoft OneDrive and for Windows Defender. They may have an impact on startup speed, so you might want to disable those, for example. On the Users tab, you can see what the current user is doing. There may be several users connected, in which case you can view that information here under a per user list. The Details tab, if you're troubleshooting an application, is where you go from the Processes tab. So an unresponsive application processes, you might right click and say go to Details, and it will then open up the actual executable. It will show you a lot more information about what this particular executable is doing. So you can see what context it's running in. The highlighted one here is OneDrive. You can see its process ID that it's running, how much CPU and memory it's using, and you can actually control the information that you can view in the Details tab by adjusting the columns. We'll take a look at that in the demonstration shortly. And then you can have a look at services running and stopped on the Services tab. If you want a bit more information about what's happening with the resources on your computer, consider using the Resource Monitor. Resource Monitor, once again, is giving us a snapshot of performance, perhaps a bit more detail than within Task Manager, but nevertheless a snapshot, and you can only draw so much conclusion from a snapshot of anything. You can click through the tabs here and look at the CPU detail, the memory detail, disk activity, and then the network. It's worth noting now that CPU, memory, disk, and network are the 4 key resources of any computer in performance terms. The Reliability Monitor is a useful tool for when you're troubleshooting a computer. It gathers statistics over a period of time and indicates that you've got problems or records that you've had problems and shows you a reliability index. You can see the computer here has a high reliability index. It hasn't dropped much. It's operating around about 10, which is great. But here we've got a day where we experienced a stop problem, and you can see that's appeared in the line for application failures. The reliability monitor tracks application failures, Windows failures, miscellaneous failures, those that it can't categorize, and warnings and information. So you can see here there's a warning on this particular day. So this is quite helpful, and you can then go on to look at more detail by highlighting the specific event. So if your users are experiencing problems, you can examine the reliability monitor to see if that shows up any information about the nature of their problems. So in the demonstration, we'll see how to use Event Viewer logs, how to use Task Manager, and how to use Resource Monitor and Reliability Monitor. Okay, to access Event Viewer, right-click Start and choose Event Viewer. You can see you've got the option to create custom views. There's one already here by default called Administrative Events, but you can create your own. Then under Windows Logs, you've got the standard logs, Application, Security, and System, but you've also got Setup as well. Take a look in a standard log like the System log. You can see that there are a number of informational events telling us that things have started or stopped as expected. If we scroll through, we might be able to find some errors. So here we've got an error, and it's telling us it's the Service Control Manager, and it'll be something that hasn't started correctly within a given time or whatever. We can investigate the detail at the bottom half of the display here. There are some warnings here. Disk 4 has the same disk, identifies as one or more disks connected to the system, so that's an issue perhaps. And then something to do with an application pop-up. With any of these logs, you can create a filter by right-clicking and choosing Filter Current Log. And then you can specify you're only really interested in critical warning type events or errors rather than informational. And then you can specify sources, specific sources. So you're interested in something to do with ACPI, power management or whatever. So you can be quite specific, quite granular about what you're viewing. And then you can look for particular user or computer type events and then click OK. So I filtered that down to just sort of major problems that I need to have a look at. So whenever you experience a problem in Windows 10, it's always worth checking the appropriate logs in Event Viewer. Windows is very good at logging problems, and it should be your first port of call if you're experiencing an issue. If you want to gather statistics from several other computers, you can create a subscription. You do that by clicking Subscriptions here, and then you need to start up the Windows Event Collector service. You can do that from the command prompt as I explained in the slide session. I click Yes to this, and then again at the remote computer end you'd have to do the same thing. Thereafter you can create a subscription, and you then specify the name and a description, and you designate the computer as being the collector initiated. This computer contacts the selected source computers and provides the subscription, or a source computer. So a source computer is in the selected groups must be configured through policy or local configuration to contact this computer and receive the subscription. So you define what it is that the computer is doing in this relationship. When you've done that, you will find forwarded events appear here. So for any computers that you're monitoring remotely through a subscription, the events will appear in the forwarded events log. I won't show you that right now. I think that's enough detail. For more detailed information about a specific Windows service, if you expand our Applications and Services logs, you can often find more information. So let's expand Microsoft Windows, and then you can scroll down here and you can see a list of services. We've got some information about BitLocker, and you can have a look in the operational log or the management log, depending on what information you're looking for. Likewise, if you're troubleshooting branch cache, click on the operational log and you can see events that pertain to issues with branch cache. So you can be very, very specific about tracking issues through Event Viewer. So let's have a look at Task Manager. You can access that by right-clicking the task bar and choosing Task Manager. it shows you the fairly limited view. If I click more details, it shows me a lot more about what's going on. You can see all of the background services running and there's sort of hidden apps. If I load up a program like, well, let's just pick out a calculator there, and then let's choose a desktop app like Excel. Minimize those. Just minimize that out of the way. You can see those listed here. It's indicated Microsoft Excel as being a 32-bit app. This is a 64-bit version of Windows 10. I can expand that. I can have a look at some more detail. If I want to find out what resources I'm using in more detail, I can right-click and say, go to details. It will open up the details tab and it will highlight the running application, the one that I selected, and it will show me information about the process ID, its status, the connected user, CPU and memory resources. I can also customize the columns that are showing here by right-clicking and choosing select columns, and then if I wanted to know more, for example, CPU time, peak working set memory, page faults and so on, I can view that information here. Let's go back to the Processes tab. On Processes, I can see the basic information about CPU, memory, disk and network and percentage. I can also change the order of the way things are listed here, so I can highlight those that are using the most memory by clicking that column. So you can see now that it shows me the anti-malware services using the most memory at the moment. And again, I can right click and if I want, I can end a task, or open the file location, or view the properties. If you click the Performance tab, you can also get an overview of what's happening right now in the system in terms of performance. I wouldn't recommend this as being the ideal way to performance troubleshoot a computer because it's a snapshot. But it can sometimes be helpful. You can get an indication about what's going on with the CPU or what's going on with the memory. Now this virtual machine we're running for demonstration purposes only has a couple of gig available, so it's going to be quite busy. So it's unsurprising that it should be using 64%. If this was a real computer with 8 or 16 gig and it was indicating 64%, that wouldn't be an alarm bell, but it'd indicate to me that there was quite a lot going on. App history shows you the resource usage since a measured period for a particular user account, the current user. Obviously, that's not going to show a lot of information here because I've just started this VM for this demo. Startup allows you to control, as we've seen already in the course, the behavior of applications that are initialized at startup, whether or not that has a high impact on the system or stop the process from running. On the Users tab, you can see the currently signed in users. Expand that and you can see what processes they're running. We've already looked at the Details tab, far more information about running processes. And if you're really experiencing problems with an application, you can right click and you can end the process tree. That's not only this particular executable, but all sub-processes spawned by that process. You need to be pretty sure you know what you're doing before you do that. And then on the Services tab, we can see the services in the local computer, and we can examine those that are running, and we can see what process ID they have, and that can help us troubleshoot things. If we understand which process IDs are being used, you can see that two that are saying PID 560 and PID 560 down here, so those are clearly related services. So we've seen on the Processes tab, on the Performance tab, that we can view some basic information about performance, but perhaps Resource Monitor is a more useful place to go. We can access that from within Task Manager. And it gives us perhaps a more detailed analysis of what's going on in the four key resources of the computer. That's the processor, the disk, the network and the memory. Those are generally considered to be the four key system resources. We get a graphical output on the far right over here of what's going on, and then we can click on the CPU page and find out more detail about particular processes. On the memory page, you can see what's going on with the physical memory, disk utilization and network activity. To be careful with analyzing the network because of the way that the information is reported. It can tell us number of kilobits on the network I/O, and that's handy to know. It can tell us a bit about TCP connections and listening ports. That's good for troubleshooting purposes. Network utilization often, though, is an indicator, and you can see that on an Ethernet network, and it doesn't have to be particularly high. Certainly doesn't need to be near 100% for that to start to be a problem. It's just that in the nature of a contention network like Ethernet, that that even at sort of 20-30%, that's a potential problem that you need to watch out for. So although you can see this information, knowing how to interpret it is more of an art form. Now the next tool you can use is the reliability history or reliability monitor. To access that, click Start and then type part of the name of the program, and then click View Reliability History. You'll find it in Control Panel. Now I'm not going to show it to you on this virtual machine because if I open it, you can see there's not much to see. The VM hasn't been running very long, so it hasn't collected much in the way of statistics. So instead I'm going to flick to the reliability history on my actual computer. So you can see here under Control Panel we've got the reliability monitor, and looking over the last few days since the beginning of the month, we can see that there's a warning event highlighted back at the beginning of the month, and there are a couple of errors dotted around throughout. Those would be the days to take a look at. Let's have a look at this day here. You can see on the right hand side that it's indicating application failures, Windows failures, miscellaneous failures, warnings and information. So this is a little red mark in the application failure area. So let's take a look at what it was. And it tells me here at the bottom that it was Internet Explorer stopped responding and was closed for whatever reason. I can view the technical information if I want to. And it's telling me that there was an application hang, something to do with, it looks like an Acrobat reader, so it's something to do with a PDF file. Probably tried to access a PDF file online, and there was a problem with it, and Internet Explorer became unresponsive. It's very useful to know because this information is gathered over a period of time. I can even go back weeks if I want to, and then have a look at what's going on back as far as February. So let's have a look at this warning here, which was down, again, another Acrobat Reader issue. So clearly that's been giving me some problems. Maybe there's an update available for Acrobat that I need to install. Let's look here. A definition update for Windows Defender Firewall. A couple of things going on here. We've got application failure of Windows Explorer, and then some sort of hardware error. Let's have a look at that. So live kernel event, parameter 3003. Looking at that, it's not exactly obvious to me what I need to do about it. So I'd probably resort to searching the internet to try to find out a bit more information about these numbers. And maybe that would help. I can also learn how to report problems and check for solutions automatically if I'm unsure how to proceed. So a very, very useful tool. In the demonstration, you saw how to monitor Windows 10 using Event Viewer Logs, Task Manager, Resource Monitor, and Reliability Monitor.